This is Writers Not Writing, the show where you can get to know your favorite writers and soon-to-be favorite writers by listening to them confess to the ways they procrastinate. Thanks for procrastinating with us. I'm Benjamin Gorman, and the quiet guy behind the glass there is Doug the producer. I write novels and collections of poetry and stuff. Doug tries his best to make me sound better. And each week we have a secret word to listen for. If you catch it, you earn the right to take an extra break at the time of your choosing from whatever is stressing you out. From NotAPipePublishing, welcome to Writers Not Writing.
Today's secret word is Lurgy.
Hail and well met readers and reviewers. I'm very excited today to have Rohan O'Duill as our guest. Rohan O'Duill is a dyslexic science fiction writer from Ireland. As a child, Rohan immersed himself in the science fiction fantasy section of his local library. Golden Age sci-fi was his bread and butter, and he works to continue that great tradition with modern sensibilities. He likes to compete at archery in his time off, and at one stage was pretty good at it. Rohan works as a head chef in his day job and minds a wild 2-year-old toddler when not in the kitchen. Rohan, welcome. Very glad to have you here today.
Thanks so much for having me, Ben. Delighted to be here.
So the first thing we have to explain before we move any further, because people are just going to be looking at this going, what are they wearing? These costumes are elaborate. We will explain. But for the folks on the podcast, tell everybody about what it is we're wearing today.
So I'm actually wearing a replica mech suit from a character from my next book, which is called Cold-Blooded. And people said there's not that much money in writing, so I decided to get into merchandise. So I've created these 3 meter tall mech suits. I didn't in the book they're titanium, but that was working out a bit expensive, so I've just gone with aluminium. Um, Big huge helmet, gun arm on the left, which is actually for the replica is actually an ice cream machine that you can make whippy ice creams and you can give them to people as you're going around in your giant mech suit. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
Well, even in aluminum, this is incredibly heavy. So I should tell the listeners, Rohan mailed one of these. I mean, this must have been your entire, marketing budget to mail this from Ireland to the United States. But I am dressed as Cartag, the villain in the Cold-Blooded book, and one of my hands is a fully functional chainsaw, which I have assured our producer I will not start up because he told me the sound quality would just be terrible if this were roaring in everyone's ears. But I have a fully functional chainsaw, which makes moving the mouse really challenging as I'm trying to operate the technology for the show. But this is, I mean, it's like you said, this is a full 3 meters. I am, so not much of me is visible to the folks who are watching on YouTube. You can really only see kind of the chest and my hands waving around here, one of which is a chainsaw. But this is amazing cosplay that we are doing. So I hope people watch the show and decide, yes, not only are we going to buy our copies of Cold-Blooded, but we need to, get in on this merch angle to compensate you for mailing this thing internationally. It must have been very, very expensive. But everybody, this is what Cartag looks like. So now folks who are watching the show can see this. Thank you for this incredible suit and the imagination to come up with it for the book. That's very cool. So I have been excited to talk about what has been going on in your in your efforts to do this marketing. And you have been really engaged in the in the marketing or in the social media network formerly known as Twitter. So tell everybody about how that's been going for you.
It's I suppose this last year has been a bit mad with social media, with everybody has kind of dispersed with Twitter being the implosion that happened right before I released my book when perfectly timed
Right,
the whole
right.
implosion happened and everybody spread out to a dozen different social media sites, which is a bit which has been I guess difficult for everyone I think because people want to maintain a presence, but to do it over, previously doing it on two or three social media sites, but now being expected to do it on 10 possibly to keep up with things is just a bit too much. But I have to say the writing community is still really strong despite what's kind of happened at Twitter. I've been so lucky to meet so many nice people along the journey. I'm in three different writing groups, which are all Discord based, but would have met people through different social media channels. Twitter initially, Threads is the latest one. But yeah, it's the writing community is strong and is there. And yeah, I knew nothing when I started writing, and uh, just met people online. People just completely freely gave me their time, their energy, their knowledge, and yeah, it's insane how many amazing friends I've met along the way. And yeah, it's a great place to be, really, you know.
Yeah, I have found that the people on Threads who've escaped to Threads have been really lovely, and the folks on Blue Sky, there's a community, a strong community developing there. So, but you're right, we have to be kind of everywhere, and it's exhausting.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah.
So, what has been pulling you? So, it's a show about procrastination, what we do when we're not writing. The craft itself is boring to describe. I put my butt in a chair and I write. And so, what has been pulling you away from your writing in terms of pop culture this week? What's been your favorite distraction?
I guess the show that recently finished, which I really enjoyed, was Shogun. I don't know if you've seen it yourself.
Yes, it was so good.
Yeah, yeah, amazing. Like I'm a big history lover, which I think a lot of authors are, because it's such a great place to draw on events for your stories. Um, and I think Shogun was great in showing both the beauty of feudal Japan and just the absolute barbarism that was going on at the time, and it balanced that perfectly. I think there's a tendency sometimes for people to romanticize about feudal Japan, and which is understandable. People are like, wow, this amazing thing, and you go, yeah, it was amazing, but also horrific, and for pretty much everybody. Like, never mind just the peasants or the whoever who were just being, yeah, your life was in, yeah, just yeah, it
Constant,
was
yeah. I
it
mean,
was
that was
crazy.
I was life was very cheap. Like, people just dying right and left, and that I was worried going into it, and even like maybe an episode or two in, that this was going to be, the classic white messiah story. Here comes this European, and he rescues everyone from presented as the flawed culture of feudal Japan. And instead, the Europeans come across horribly, which I thought was good. Like, yes, they were not saviors by any stretch. And then you're right, it doesn't make feudal Japan look like a wonderful place to be. It makes it look like this is not a place you want to visit. Very few of the Europeans survive. It's not great. But I was so impressed with the Japanese actors. They carried it, and the woman who played oh, what is the woman who is the lead, who was the kind of adopted daughter of the prospective shogun? What is her character's name?
Um, I'm going to pronounce this terribly. Americaso or something.
Yes,
Yeah,
Mariko, or she was fantastic, and being able to. She's got this monologue early in, I think maybe a third episode early on in the series, about the walls that she has to keep in her mind to not share the pain that she is feeling. And she did such a great job of portraying somebody withholding, which, from an acting perspective, it would be easy to merely appear wooden, but instead she conveys that she's keeping all of this inside. Yeah, she did just a fantastic job. That was a really cool show.
yeah,
Um,
phenomenal. And yeah, so sad. I'm not going to give away any spoilers, but very sad at the end
oh
for
yeah. And
yeah,
I love
well,
when a show, when writers of anything have the courage to to not feel like, oh, we have to give the kind of pat happy ending, and everyone gets together and we have the happy ending that you want. No, that's not the way the story ends, and the ending felt authentic and tragic. Like,
Yeah, yeah, definitely, yeah.
yeah, yeah, that was a great show. So what about in the news? What's been pulling you away from your work?
Well, I don't know if you've heard this story, but they put in a portal um between Dublin and New York. I don't know if this news has got around to other parts of the
Until
States.
you told me about this, I had no idea. I did look it up. Yeah, tell everybody about this. It's a cool idea for an art project, but tell everybody what happened.
So yeah, so they basically decided they were going to have this portal, which is basically a big screen, and people on either side can see it. And Dublin City Council, which wouldn't be renowned for their good decision making, decided to put this in a place in Dublin, which is probably the biggest concentration of antisocial behaviour of anywhere in the city. Um, and yeah, and obviously mayhem ensued. So the first week there was all sorts of things going on, people mooning, and like not kind of the college students, the like 40-year-old builders, and cracks that you really don't want to see. Um, so there was all this kind of stuff going on, and then it started getting a little bit out of hand, where uh, people were putting up pictures. So on the on the New York side, people were putting up pictures of potatoes, and then somebody on the Irish side, some Egypt, put up pictures of twin towers, which caused obviously, yeah,
Oh yeah.
massive ill feeling. But then in return, an adult film star, I think, decided to get her revenge. I don't know if you noticed this. And she decided to get her revenge on the Irish by going up to the portal and revealing herself to the people of Dublin. I'm not sure if she understands how revenge
I
works.
was gonna say, I
Um,
think we came across really well there when our worst
yeah,
behavior was someone promoting her OnlyFans by flashing the people of Dublin. Like, that's not not particularly injurious. Whereas yeah, the pictures of the Twin Towers, somebody flashed a swastika. Like, I was like, oh, that does
really,
not make the
yeah.
people of Dublin look great. That's awful.
No,
Like,
no, it's
yeah, then she flashed them and they were like, okay, now there we're drawing a line. I was like, really, that's the problem?
yes, yes. No, if you're going to Dublin, just don't go around that area. Basically, just stay away. Okay,
They
from there.
chose
Yeah,
the wrong neighborhood. Yeah, so they have now discontinued the portal temporarily and they're looking for some kind of technological fix. And I feel like, maybe the fix is this might be an actual real good free speech kind of experiment where the people of the cities can say to one another, look, this is not how we want to be represented. Knock it off.
yeah,
But yeah, it is a clever idea for an art installation, where people could see each other in essentially real time looking through this portal. I think it's a cool idea. I can imagine the artist thinking this will be great and not thinking, oh, people will abuse this in some unfortunate ways.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's yeah. I think there's security going on to it now. So,
Yes,
um,
yeah, good. But yeah, that so everybody look that up. It's and the name of it is questionable too.
hole, the hole by the pole.
The Hole by the Pole. Like, nobody thought, how could that be misconstrued?
Um, so yeah, that is the Dublin name for it, as in it's not the official name for it. So
I'm okay, I'm glad to
the
hear that. I didn't understand
so
that. I was like, the hole
as
by the pole.
as soon as anything is put into anywhere in Dublin, there's a local name attached to it. So there was at one stage there was this big statue put in the central of O'Connell Street, which had this woman, and there was fountain going down over, and she was called the locals called her the floozy and the jacuzzi. So so as soon as anything goes in, there's a name attached to it, and the portal was by the Spire, which is this weird. Back in the Celtic Tiger, when we had too much money, they just put in this huge needle in the center of Dublin that goes a couple of hundred meters high. It's nobody knows why or what, but it's made of stainless steel, so like it's you could actually invest it now because it's probably worth millions in stainless steel,
Raw
but
materials.
materials, yeah. But yeah, so that's on O'Connell Street, and then the portal's beside it, so it's the hole by the pole is what it's known locally as.
That's that. I mean, that is pretty wonderful. Like as a tourist, I would have to go see. Have you seen the hole by the pole? We got to go check out the hole by the pole. That's that's it's across town from the floozy and the jacuzzi. That's
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
great. So when you aren't writing, what is something that has been, a hobby that has been occupying your time?
Yes, I think you mentioned it in the intro. I
Yes.
have been competing at archery for almost 25 years now. Um, and yeah, that's been a big part of life for me and my family. So a lot of us were involved in it. So I didn't do it as a kid because I made bows and arrows, but there was no club nearby when I was a kid. So it was only when I was 20, it started in my younger brother's school. So he started, and then my mother started, and then I started, and my uncles, my cousins. So there's like this whole huge family tradition, and
Yeah.
I guess my brother and myself got quite serious at it, and we would have shot for Ireland on a number of occasions. And yeah, yeah, it's a great sport. And my eldest son now is competing. He shoots for Ireland now. He's 20, and he is heading over to World Field Championships in Canada in October. So it's his last year as a junior, so he's hoping to do something over there. So hopefully he does well over there. And my 2-year-old, he's maybe next year, the year after, I'll get him into it. But it's a
Yes.
it's a great multi-generational sport, because like my uncle's still quite competitive. He'd be 65 then. So like you could literally have, 3, 4 generations of people shooting at the same time, which
So
is
if your son
pretty
does
cool.
well enough on the Irish team, will he be eligible for like Olympic level competition?
So he shoots in a division that isn't in the Olympics.
Hmm.
So he shoots compound bows, which I don't know how familiar you are with archery, but they're the ones with the wheels, which the recurvers would accuse of being cheaters because they have
I was going to
these
ask about the
gadgets and gizmos.
technology
Yeah,
there. Did you
yeah.
compete in both, or which did you shoot with?
So most competitively, I would have shot barebow, which was without any of the gadgets or gizmos at all. Which and field archery was the big sport that I would have competed in. Um, and I would have shot barebow for years. I also shot recurve and compound just as well, but the one I would have been most competitive in would have been barebow.
So do you rib your
Was
son about using a cheater bow, or do you, have to acknowledge you
uh,
too?
yeah, I do a little bit until he broke all my personal bests, and then I was like, right, I'll
Yes.
I'll leave him alone now that
Yeah, you just
he's
have to be a
correct.
proud father. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
unfortunate when you can't gloat anymore. That's great. Oh, that's really cool. And so the he'll be in that competition will be in Canada this year.
yeah. So that's in Canada at the start of October. So
Oh, that's very
yeah,
cool. Yeah,
yeah,
that's a good proud dad moment. That is very
yeah,
cool.
yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
and you're right to be, to be engaged in a sport where you can continue it. It's not like, oh, you peak at 22 and then you can't really compete in any real way. But that yeah, your uncle in his 60s is still going to be able to do it. That's wonderful.
Yeah, and I think trying to remember which Olympics, and I'm terrible with years and names, but I think might have been 2004 Japanese archer that came third in the men's was 50 in his 50s.
Yeah.
So like it doesn't have that there's a fitness and strength you need, but it's not that kind of aerobic fitness that will only come at that you only really have for a certain
Yes.
span of your life.
Yeah, well, yeah, it is so skill based, so much of it is, and I would imagine folks who are practicing that repetition is, you're not going to be at your best at 17 years old. You haven't put in the hours yet. So,
Yeah, it's hard. Although you you'd be surprised at some of the people that come through. There was a couple of Olympians that were like, I'm trying to remember again names,
Yeah,
but there was one Mexican girl competing in the Olympics at 14. So and yeah, I think like she wasn't just competing, she was up there, and yeah, so yeah, it's I don't know, there's
that's
definite
like a prodigy.
skills, but
Those folks are, they're like the prodigy violinists, 14,
yeah,
15
yeah,
at that to be competing at that level. That's amazing.
yeah, unbelievable.
So one of the things I like to ask authors as just kind of a Rorschach test is if you were in a D&D style world, what would be your race and class?
Okay, so I was so yeah, I up till a couple of years ago, I had no idea what D&D was. So I just got to put that out there. I don't know if it's not a big thing in Ireland, or I just wasn't in those circles, or what, but
I
I
think
just never came across it.
Warhammer might be a bigger thing in the
Okay.
UK than D&D, but similar. You've got your kind of fantasy elements or Lord of the Rings, something like that. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, if we go with Lord of the Rings, I would go with Hobbit.
they totally exist in D&D. I think they're called halflings, but it's the same. Yeah.
Okay, okay,
So
same thing. Okay, perfect.
yes. So what does that, do you think, reveal about you as an author? How does that, what does that say about you?
He has an author. Okay. Yeah, I like to have lots of snacks, I guess. That's yeah, like 11s, and yeah, and beer with every meal as well, I think
Yeah.
is good, and yeah, that's probably, yeah, what it would reveal most about me, and yeah, I think
And
so.
as you write, do you make sure you have snacks handy? Are you a writing while eating writer?
Yeah, I think you have to.
Yeah, yeah. Mine is not healthy snacks by any means, or full second breakfast. It's the bag of Doritos. But yes, I've got to have my snacks as I go to stay fueled up.
Yeah, I think you almost need little rewards as you're going along, because as you said earlier, it's kind of tedious, you sit down, and you're just there, and you're like, right, I got to get through this. And so I think more so even with edits, I think when you're writing, you can get caught up in it, and you just go. But then when you're in editing, you're like, right, I'll do an hour, then I'll have a cup of tea and a biscuit, and yeah,
Yes.
so it's those little rewards along the way that keep you going, I think.
Absolutely. Yes. Reward yourself as you go. So, okay. If you were a halfling, you're a hobbit, and you get ambushed by three, what they call level one. So these are three small, easy goblins in the woods. What would you do?
Yeah, I presume and I'll shoot them with my bow.
I
Can I do
mean,
that?
yeah,
Is that
if you've got archery skills in real life, I think you're going to be fine in a Lord of the Rings style world. Yes.
perfect? That sounds good.
Excellent. Okay, so we'll go to our commercial break. And when we come back, I'm going to ask you what you've been daydreaming about lately. Special announcement time. NotAPipePublishing has always been committed to helping authors and readers find one another. Well, the show, which is all about helping readers get to know writers, just hit a milestone 10,000 views on YouTube. So to celebrate, instead of charging authors to advertise their books on the show, I'm going to run your ads for free throughout 2024. If you want to make a 30 to 60-second video about your book, let folks know what it's about and where to find it, and don't forget your name and the title. I'll run one or two of those in our ad spot each week. Just send an MP4 file to the NotAPipe email address in the show notes. Let's fix up some readers and authors into reader relationships. 2024. More readers, more writers, more books.
In 1883, the famous German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche put forth the idea of the Übermensch, the Superman. In my latest novel, Project Übermensch, Geoffrey Cannon is either a modern-day messiah or the product of a military experiment gone awry. Either way, the young, inspirational guru has mad powers and metaphysical skills. But Geoffrey's life as spiritual healer and speaker takes a dark turn when some devotees, young women he's had brief affairs with, are inexplicably murdered under grisly circumstances. and rumors of Bigfoot, Sasquatch abound. Amazon is the best place to find my books. That's Lonnie Busch, Busch with a C like the beer. I hope you'll check them out.
No one wants to live in a country ruled by wizards, unless the alternative is worse. Peter Watts, author of Blindside, says, a near-perfect blend of implacable horror, gallows humour, and ecological apocalypse. Nick Namadas, author of The Second Shooter, says, relentlessly radical and often hilarious. Cascade, Book 1 in the Sleep of Reason trilogy, by Rachel A. Rosen. Available now at bookshop.org, Apple Books, Barnes & Noble, Amazon, and at bppress.ca.
Authors, poets, screenwriters, writers of all kinds. We're putting together our team for the Alzheimer's Association's annual The Longest Day fundraiser, and we want you to join us to use your writing superpowers for a good cause. Our team, Writing Against the Darkness, joins together via Zoom or in-person meetups and writes from dawn until dusk on the summer solstice. So mark your calendars for Thursday, June 20th, 2024. We're teaming up with some wonderful partner organizations to build our team. Thanks to the Author Alchemy Summit, Indigo Editing, Unsolicited Press, Pile Press, the Pile Press magazine Chunk, and Overcup Press for joining with NotAPipePublishing in this fundraiser. There are links to all of those partners in the show notes. If you want to get to network with writers from these great partners, get a whole lot of writing done, and raise funds for Alzheimer's research and care for families suffering from this disease, click on the link in the show notes and join the team. You're going to be writing anyway. Why not write even more and do some extra good for the world? See you there. Welcome back, everyone. I forgot to mention, Rowan taught me a new word. So Rowan has been feeling what here in the United States we would say a little under the weather. And the word for it, you tell everybody what it is called, because I love this term. I want to make this part of the American lexicon as well.
I caught the lurgy. So
Lurgy.
yeah, basically
The
lurgy,
despised lurgy. This is a great term for any kind of, undefined malady. You're just feeling you got the lurgy. I think that's so great. It's not great that you have the lurgy. That term is wonderful.
No.
I love
It's
that.
kids though, isn't it? They just carry. They're just basically just virus carriers.
Yes.
You know probably that more than
Oh.
anybody in your work.
Well, and as teachers, we tend to develop this really hardy immune system after years and years of teaching, because we're exposed to all the kinds of lurgy that are out there. But yes, you've got a 2-year-old and they touch everything and then bring it home.
They just pick up everything.
Yeah.
And you probably can't say it to your students, but we've been calling them Typhoid Mary for the last couple of weeks. Just
I mean, we probably could get away with it because I don't know that they would get the reference. And then we'd have to go, okay, now I have to do a lesson on there was actually a woman who was referred to as Typhoid Mary and explain everything. Yes. So was your son sick too, or did he just give it to you and then, toddle around, running around going, I'm fine. You deal with it, Dad.
Oh no, he was sick and he gets cranky, so we were all cranky. So it's not a good recipe, but
until they fall asleep. And then when they're sick and asleep, they're at their most adorable. And you're like, oh yeah, this was what it was like when he was an infant. He's at his cutest. I don't like him being sick, but this is kind of great when they're, knocked out by it. I used to, like my son would get sick when he was, like 6 or 7 and would revert to being like the adorable 3-year-old, sleepy version of himself. And I was like, oh, it's terrible that you've got the lurgy, but it's pretty cute when you've got the lurgy.
I just want to watch TV and stuff. You're like, oh, really? Okay. Well, I suppose we can allow it today.
Yeah. So what have you been when you're, pulled away from your work, even though daydreaming is in a way part of the process, but what's been, floating around? What have you been marinating in lately?
So, besides for thinking about tranquilizing children, the big thing I have been marinating lately is the Kickstarter campaign. So I'm running a Kickstarter campaign for my next book Cold-Blooded. The idea really came about because I wanted to make an audiobook of the first book, and which is kind of expensive.
Yes.
And I wanted to release the second book, and I couldn't do both of these things at the same time for financial reasons.
Right.
So I thought if I could get a Kickstarter going and get some funds in, then I'd be able to launch the book and get the audiobook set up at the same time. But Kickstarter is a whole thing in its own. So there is so much to learn. So I've been reading things on forums on Facebook and finding all kinds of stuff out. But it's very interesting and exciting thing to do, really, and it's cool coming up with the different tiers and the different bits of loot for people, and yeah, been really enjoying it.
I have been in the exact same boat. We are launching a Kickstarter in July, and learning how to do one successfully. A friend of mine, author Jesse Kwok, recommended a book about Kickstarter just so that I could, kind of fully immerse myself, because it is, like you said, it's a lot to learn. How to make those successful, and I've been spending my time trying to develop a lot of images so that it's not, pure text on there, and that's a lot of time, and it's not my normal wheelhouse. So that's yeah, it's been tricky. But how's one of the tough things to figure out is where to set the kind of the goal. How did you make that choice about how much you were going to need to raise?
So I haven't set a figure on it yet, and all the advice comes in that the first time you do it to set it quite low. So
Mhm.
I think that's what I'm going to do is I'm gonna probably going to set it at €500, to set it quite low, and the €500 would basically allow me to put out the special edition book, but wouldn't achieve the goal. So I'm going to put the audio books as the stretch
Right.
goals, which is the aim. But at least then, if um if I get the 500, if I get that, people can still get their special edition books, which have been designed and are there. So it'd be a shame uh, to set the goal high and then not use what is there, because I think um, yeah, my
Yeah.
friend Lonnie has done up some cool designs. So I've got posters and different book cover for the Kickstarter. So I think yeah, I'd really like to use it. So I'm going to go
Yes.
low and hopefully hopefully hit those stretch goals. But if I don't, that's fine. We get some cool special edition books.
Well, and folks who are listening, we will put a link to that in the show notes. So as you are watching or listening, scroll down there and support that Kickstarter. But yeah, that judgment call of where to go. We were trying to figure out. I've done one for a book in the past, and similarly, I set the goal low so that I knew I would fund, and it was successful, which is nice. So now that you got the win in your track record. But for this one, we decided to essentially use Kickstarter to measure the interest. And so we set the goal high so that if people aren't, because what we're going to be doing is a monthly book club for the publishing company. We've got so many titles now, we can send people a fancy book box with cool merch and stuff in it every month, and we can go on for years. We've got enough books now. And so I'm excited about that, but I don't want to have four people sign up and be spending my Saturdays sending four book boxes. Like, either this is a real book club that has lots of members, or nobody lost any money because it didn't fund. And so
Yeah.
that would Kickstarter is nice for that, to be able to go, where do we want to use this as a mechanism to fund something, or do we want to use this essentially as a mechanism to say, is this really viable? And so yeah, that's a tough. It's challenging to figure out all these things. I mean, just like with books, setting the price point is so important. People outside of the industry don't understand. As authors, I would love to give my book away for free. That would be great, except we know books that are given away for free aren't read. So you have to set a price point that says to somebody, Rowan's book is valuable. You should pay for it. Once you do, you will then commit to read it. Because the point for us as authors is not, I'm going to be a millionaire. It's you're actually going to read my words. Like, and so that's always really tricky. Where do you set price? My son is studying business right now at university, and price point is one of those things they talk a lot about. How do you figure out what is the right price for something? It's tricky.
Yeah, it's so difficult because, and you're told to do your your sales or whatever to get interest up. But then when you're selling your putting your book on sale for 99 cents, people are like, oh, it's not 99 cents, or what's that worth? It's worth nothing. And then you're like, well, will people pay this or pay that? And it's so dependent on where you are and who you are, because it's interesting. I was talking to an author recently who sells a lot of books in India,
Yeah.
but they can't charge the prices in India that they would charge in the UK. So they have to have a different price point there because it's just because of the average wage is different. So yeah, it's such a yeah. I'm glad you have an expert now in your house.
Yeah, well,
That's
at
going to
least
come
he's
in
learning to
handy.
be one, yes. And then what my
Yes.
fear is he's going to come home from university and say, "Sure, I'll give you all this insight, but I'm now going to charge you a commission fee for, for my expertise, Dad." And I'm going to be like, "No, what have I done?" But yeah, I've had that same issue with, setting the prices for India specifically, where you can go as low as 99 rupees. Well, if you go that low, you make like 12 rupees, which is, nothing, And so, and you're right, people look at a low price point and say, this must not be valuable. And so, how do we let folks know, no, I'm giving you an inexpensive book because to me, you are valuable. I want you to be reading this book, but that is a hard thing to convey in a world where there are so many wonderful books flooding the market and people have to evaluate with too little information, what is a good book for my time. So yeah, I wish you luck with the Kickstarter. How long is that? Has that Kickstarter already started?
No, it's just in pre-launch,
Oh,
so
okay.
it won't be starting till September. So I just set up the pre-launch this
Okay.
week, just to try and get some. I'll keep banging on about it, and
Yeah.
hopefully just pick up people, get people engaged on it, and then hopefully when it launches, then we have some people
Can
involved.
people already sign up for notifications so that they'll be notified when it goes live? And so that's another thing I didn't know about. So I thought, okay, well, ours is going to be going in July. I have time. No, you've got to get everything ready so that people can learn about it and then sign up for notifications. So again, we will
Yes.
post a link. Folks can sign up for notifications so that they know about yours when it becomes available in September. Because yeah, that's part of the learning of all of this. Um, so one of the other things that I like to, I pretend that I'm going to be really faithful about this and always post these on social media, and I've actually been pretty terrible about doing so consistently. But if I were to remember, what would be a poll question you'd like me to put out that would be, where you'd want to see where people stand?
This one comes from me and my brother lying in bed at night, and I used to have all the Airfix spaceship Star Trek models hanging out of the ceiling, and we always used to argue about which spaceships would win. So what I'm going to ask for this poll is a Romulan battle cruiser or a Klingon bird of prey. So
Which is a good
that's the
one. Do
poll.
you have an elbow on the scale? Which was your favorite of those?
I just love the Romulan battle cruiser. I just think it's such a cool looking ship, and especially it just hasn't aged either. Like you look at it now, and that somebody could have designed that yesterday, and you'd be like, "That's a really cool looking ship," which is kind of it's interesting how that design is. It's just yeah, I think it's ageless. It's so cool.
Well, yeah, it's for folks who don't know, the Romulan battle cruiser is a sleeker design, and the Klingon one, I think the Klingon design might still be created today, but it would be created by somebody who wants to convey this is a kind of brutalist, it's just kind of janky. It's not, it's it doesn't look nearly as menacing. I think the Romulan battlecruiser, for me too, the Romulan battlecruiser looks like something that would fare better in atmosphere. The Klingon battlecruiser, it's only moving in space. That thing, that thing would those wings would bust right off when confronted with wind of any kind. But yeah, they're both cool. Yeah, I'll see if I can find pictures of both and post those
Oh,
because
yeah.
yeah, that would be an interesting debate. And folks who are not, Star Trek fans can still look at the designs and say which is going to win here. Um, so what is a book that you haven't read yet that you're looking forward to that's on your TBR pile?
So the book I am next going to get stuck into, I have an arc of Mage, which is written by Dale Stromberg. And Dale is a friend of mine. He's actually my editor. He's a really cool guy. He is American, but he lives in Malaysia, and he works as a translator from Japanese into English. So
Wow.
he's next level genius, and he's been working on Mage for 10 years. It's a epic high fantasy that's 400 pages long,
Yep.
but I don't feel it's I with Dale it's not bloat because
Yeah.
he writes his writing is good, you know. So I'm really looking forward to it. It sounds fascinating from everybody who I have heard who has started it. So that's my next read, and that's out in October. So yeah, I'm really looking
Yeah.
forward to that one.
I'm nodding along enthusiastically because it reminds me of a friend of mine, Miko Azul. Her first novel was an epic high fantasy. Same thing. It was like four, maybe 500 pages. I mean, it was a tome, but similarly took her 10 years, 10 years of planning and prep work to create this universe, and it's great. I mean, and the sequel comes faster because she had
Yeah.
already created the universe, so it only took her what I think 3 years for the again huge tome of a sequel. But yeah, if folks out there like epic high fantasy, being able to kind of escape into one of these big books where you really can spend your time in that world is part of the joy of it. And how is mage spelled in that case?
Maej
Maej by Dale. What's Dale's last name?
Stromberg.
Dale Stromberg. Okay, so and
Yeah.
so when that one, so you've just got the arc, so that's not even out yet. But
Yeah,
when
that's not even
when
out
that
yet. Yeah. But
hits,
yeah, if anyone wants to get the arc, they can actually if they find me on Threads, I can point them in the right direction. So
yeah,
Threads or Twitter. Yeah.
yeah, that's great. So I have been also asking authors as kind of a joke, a quasi joke, to kind of push back on the attention economy, which I think sometimes inclines people to say like the most horrible thing they can think of to say in order to generate controversy and get themselves attention. What would be the thing that you would say that would be your hot take to gin up controversy? So what would be yours? What would be your outrage machine? Thing that you would toss out into the world to infuriate everyone.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel I don't know if I can say this. I think maybe it's just a bit too explosive, but I don't really care too much about the Oxford Comet debate.
Oh my gosh, yeah,
Um,
that's a hot take. Yes, people,
but
authors will lose their minds.
yeah, but like if you want to do it, do it. If you don't want to do it, right? So I thought to myself, you know, that's a fairly I'm being fairly neutral here, you know?
Yeah,
And I got more backlash off that
isn't that
than
wild?
taking one side or the other because people were like, you can't not care. You have to take a side. So, yeah, I think I lost 36 Twitter followers the day I said that.
Oh, I mean, it seems like it would have to be a joke, and yet you're right. People take it so seriously. That yeah, they I think people don't understand this is a faux debate. Like, you can certainly have an opinion about which is clearer or which is more concise. That's fine. But yeah, the level of outrage. Yeah, that's a perfect example for this one.
Well, I'm really sorry to bring that onto your show,
Yeah.
Ben. That and what's going to happen after this? You know, who knows?
I
Who
mean,
knows?
it
Yeah.
might be wonderful. Same thing, some people will say, That's it. This, I have platformed you and you need to be canceled because you've come out as somebody who just doesn't care either way. Take a stand." That's great. Yeah, and as
Yeah.
an English teacher, I am pro Oxford, the journalism teacher down the hall, anti Oxford, So even in our own school, we have this debate, but simply not taking a stand, that's a controversial position. I am impressed. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
where can all of our viewers and listeners find you to online to connect with your work?
So I'm on Threads. I'm on probably all the social media networks, but I'm not that active on a lot of them. I'm still on Threads. I'm still on Twitter. I have a Substack called First Chapter Reads. So I do a little podcast where it's not really a podcast. I just read the first chapter of an indie book, and the tagline is, "And I hope you might find your next favorite author."
Yeah.
That's it. So it turns out some people like an Irish accent. I think that's a lot to do with Cillian Murphy and Colin Farrell rather than anything else. And it's not usually this gravelly. I'm
Yes.
sick at the moment. So I have this podcast, which is very simple. I read the first chapter of an indie book. And if people want to, then I have the link up there. If people enjoy it, they can go off and buy the book. I currently have about a year's worth of books to get through. But if anybody does want me to feature their book, they can find me on one of the social media networks or through Substack and let me know, and I'll get to their book at some stage. And that's called First Chapter Reads on Substack.
Oh,
You can get it on the other Spotify and Apple and all of those as well. But yeah, that's the main place it is.
that's a great
Um,
idea. I will be one of the people submitting for a year from now. I would love to hear because my books have very specific kind of like sense of place in the world, and hearing it read with an Irish accent would add this other layer to it that would be so cool. So yes, I will have to send I'm trying to think, off the top of my head, which book would lend itself
well,
best, but
you
I'll
could
I'll
do
be
the
I'll be
tour of Tralee is probably the best one, is it? With uh,
yes.
yeah, don't read this book. Is that sorry?
I
I'm
think
terrible.
that's going to be
I
the
can't
one.
remember
Yes.
names.
Yes.
Yes,
I think
yes.
I'll
So
send you the
uh,
beginning of Don't Read This Book. That would be so great.
yeah, I
Um,
have it on my Kindle, so you're fine. I was like, yeah, you could actually do. I presume there's going to be there'll be walking tours of Don't Read This Book in Tralee at some stage, and they'll go
wouldn't
through all the
that
landmarks.
I mean, it came about. I was there and I was walking around and I was like, I want this to be authentic. So I was taking pictures of things like the street signs because the character is an American who wakes up and she's only seeing it. And there's no guide. And so she's pronouncing everything incorrectly. She's not understanding and she's trying to figure out from what she's seeing where she is. And I thought that would be a challenging experience for an American looking around the streets going, I'm pretty sure all these signs are in English, but are they? You know? Yes, and folks who have not been there, it is a beautiful little town. It's really great. So,
Yeah,
yeah, that was a fun scene. Yes, you would be so perfect for reading that. Oh, now that I think about it, that would be great.
okay,
Um,
we'll organize that. We'll get that
yeah,
going.
get that happening. So, who would be a recommendation you would have for who I should have on this show as a guest?
So yeah, I was going to say, so the guy who amazingly talented artist as well as author is Lonnie Busch, and he designed my Kickstarter book cover and the images of the mech, Mint, the mech. He modeled it in 3D, so he can just give me different angles and all this kind of thing. He's unbelievably talented guy, and his books are amazing as well. And yeah, really, really cool guy. And I would say that he'd be great to have on. And if you want a bigger list, I could probably give you about a dozen people as well. But
That would be great. Yes. So Lonnie Bush, I should yeah, and encourage folks check out his work so that if he ends up on the show, you've already read his work. You're
yeah,
ahead of the game. You're
yeah,
prepared.
yeah. Yeah, his book, All Hope of Becoming Human. I am listening to it on audiobook at the moment, and it's fantastic. He's got this unique. He's one of these guys that has a unique voice. If you know, it's I could pick something up and go, oh yeah, Lonnie wrote this. Because you just by the way it's written. So yeah, he's a
Well,
very cool
and when
guy.
you're reading somebody where you know the person, does the fact that you know Lonnie change the way that you perceive the book at all? I've had that with friends where they were like, this book, one of mine, the protagonist is a 17-year-old black young woman, like she's as different from me as possible. And I had a friend who was like, I had a really hard time getting into it at first because I knew you were the author and she's so different. I couldn't imagine her separated from you. And then I ended up, just like you're in the process of doing right now, I ended up hiring somebody to do the audiobook who is a young black woman. And the experience of hearing her read it, a wonderful actor. I mean, she just did a fantastic job. I was like, oh, this is a different book than the one that I wrote in a good way. Like she added so much to it. I was like, this is really good. And then I had to go, oh yeah, I wrote this. Could you hear Lonnie in your head as you're hearing it?
I don't know. I think there's this strange thing where, like Lonnie's the nicest guy in the world, and then you have these like horrific things happening in the book, and you're like, couldn't have written this, could he?
Yeah.
That's and I've had that with so many different friends I've had, and you're like, these people are such nice people that you're like, did they really do that to their character?
Yes, yes. You're like, I've just seen an insight into your psyche that I'm not sure I wanted. Oh, that's excellent. Okay, so before we get to our advice for our listeners, some folks I need to thank. Thanks to the artist Max Oakland, who reached out and provided one of his songs for our intro song, I Prefer the Dusk. Let Max know you like it by following him on Twitter at Max Oakland with 3Ds. And thanks to Halisna CCO for their song Kids for the ad break. If you're in a band and you'd like your song used on the show, I'd love to highlight a listener's work like Max's song, so email me about that. Thanks to Doug, the producer, for making the show sound good and taking the blame when it doesn't. And I cannot forget to mention Writers Not Writing is a production of NotAPipe Publishing. So please go to NotAPipePublishing.com. Check out the amazing books written by writers who didn't procrastinate too much. If you like this show, rate it and review it wherever you found it. Please check out Rowan's, what's the first book in the series?
Cold Rising.
Cold Rising, and be
Yeah.
ready for the Kickstarter for Cold Blooded in September. And when you read Cold Rising, give it a short review. Click on that 5th star. It really does make a difference. And make Rowan's day. Click on that 5th star. And similarly for this show, click on the little thumbs up there on your computer right now. It is very helpful to spread the word for the show. So, Rowan, what would you like our listeners to take into their week as your advice?
Becoming a writer, even though I'm dyslexic, it's just what happens when life gives you melons.
Yeah, my roommate, my freshman year of college, was dyslexic, and it just made him one of the hardest working people I knew. Like, he powered through and was, it took him longer to read all the textbooks, but he did very well in school. He just worked harder than everyone else. So absolutely, when life gives you lemons, yeah, if you can rise to the level of becoming a novelist, that's really making some excellent lemonade out of the lemons. And I always just say to folks, a book without spaces would be gibberish, and our lives need spaces too. So don't ignore the spaces. And third, no matter how much you procrastinate, Rowan and I are still proud of you.
If I take my time